Dr. Oluwasola Omoju is a research fellow with the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies of the National Assembly, Abuja, Nigeria. In this capacity, he provides technical support to the National Assembly and relevant committees there as a research fellow. He was also a visiting scholar at the Institute for Sustainable Economic Development of the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Austria, and a guest researcher at the EUEPiN Laboratory of the Université du Havre in France between 2016 and 2017. He has participated in evidence-informed policy-making seminars by the European Union, the African Academy of Science, and the International Network for the European Union. He has also served as, he has vast experience with policymakers and has led externally funded research projects that involved collaboration between researchers and policymakers. He's a recipient of several grants, including the Codestria Claxo Ideas South-South Collaborative Research Grant, the EIB GDN Applied Development Finance Fellowship, the PEP Page 2 Research Grant, the INSA Science Essay Award, and South African Institute for Internal Affairs Thematic Research Grant. His research interests span across energy economics and climate policy, public financial management, applied development economics, Africa's trade policy, and evidence-based policy making. Thank you.
So who are politicians? And at this point in time, why do we need science advice more than ever? Why do we need science advice more than ever now? Science advice have become more important now because there are a lot of emerging domestic and global issues that you can't just use the rule of the thumb, that you can't just use your opinion, that you can't just use your thinking to make decisions. Take, for example, climate change. Take, for example, infant mortality. Take, for example, conflicts. Take, for example, so many of these emerging issues. In fact, the most recent one, look at COVID-19. These are they are emerging issues every day that you can't just take decision on them based on what you think. There has to be some evidence informing your decision. And also, another reason why science advice is more important today is because probably due to proliferation of social media and all that, there has been a growing landscape of misinformation, which some people call fake news. On several issues, you see a lot of things on the internet, on a particular issue. Some of them might be correct, some of them might be wrong. So that is one of the more reasons why science advice, evidence-based policy making is very, very important. And if you look at what has been happening recently in terms of COVID-19, like I put an example of COVID-19 and chloroquine. That has been one of the most contentious issues when it comes to the issue of providing science advice, and particularly in terms of misinformation, in terms of who do we believe, who should we not believe. So in this entire process, conducting your research and providing evidence to policymakers involves a lot of process. It involves a lot of things that, like a lot of lobbying, a lot of collaboration, a lot of things. But at the end of the day, everything you do here, you are a policy analyst, you are a researcher, you members of the public, lobbyists, private sector, whoever, at the end of the day, in that circle, your research is incomplete until it gets to the users. And most of the time, those users are the core policymaker. I know in the past few days, we have learned who are the likely stakeholders in every research that you are doing. You have an idea of who are the most likely policymakers. or who are the likely stakeholders. But the key thing is that there are major important stakeholders. And I think one of them are the politicians. Because at the end of the day, they are the one that will sign the policy. They are the one that will approve the policy. So everything you do within this circle is incomplete until it gets to these guys, the executive arm of the government, the legislature, for them to make decisions. And that is extremely important. So why are these people important, particularly politicians? Why are politicians very important in the policy-making process? In fact, as I said, politicians might be the most important stakeholder. When you do your stakeholder mapping, they might be the most important. Of course, you have civil society organizations, you have lobbyists, you have the community, you have the public, you have but the most important, most times, is the politician. Because as I said, they are the one that will approve the policy, or they are the ones that say, no, this policy will not be implemented. So they have significant power to influence the policy. Significant power. And if you look at that exercise I gave to us, if you look at the exercise, when I'm very sure most of us, when we are doing the stakeholder mapping, at the top of that stakeholder map will likely be the president, the parliamentarians, or probably the ministers, because those are the key people in terms of influence, in terms of power. Those are the people that make that decision. Secondly, politicians are motivated by public interest, personal interest, or special interest, which can sometimes be competing. You are a researcher, you just want to do your research and let your research be seen. That is your interest. But politicians are complicated human beings.
Sorry, Dr. Omoju, I'm sorry for cutting in. Please, could you make your screen, can you share it as full screen? Some participants want to see that. Can you make it?
Okay.
Yes.
Is it okay now?
Yes, it's better now. Thank you.
All right.
Sorry for cutting.
Okay. So politicians, so they are motivated by a lot of interests. They think about their constituency, they think about the next election, they think about the economy, they think about themselves, they think about their families, they think about a lot of things that you as a researcher don't think of. Those are not your primary concern, but for them, the politician is thinking about the next election. So in the policy-making process, these are the things at the back of their mind. And once again, politicians are driven by public opinion. As in, that is extremely important for them because they want to look good in the eyes of the public. They want their constituency to say, yeah, that is my senator. He's doing very well. It's extremely important to them. And they don't want to be publicly embarrassed for not knowing the facts. Particularly from the experience that we have seen working here at the National Assembly as researchers, is they want to stand in the chambers of the National Assembly and comfortably read facts, like they expect anybody to challenge them. It gives them a lot of confidence. So these are very, very important. And also, politicians, the way they are, they often cherry pick your evidence that support their own arguments most of the time. Most of the time, this happens. And there was an experiment that was conducted at London School of Economics. And they gave two, even not politicians now, they gave two researchers with different political ideology. One is neoclassical, one is liberal. And they gave them the same research evidence, the same research results. And they asked them to use this research report, just write a one-page recommendation for a politician, the same research result, but they provided different recommendations. So most of the time, the evidence, what the politician will want to believe, is what is in line with his own line of thought, with his own argument. So we have to add this at the back of our mind. So what is the relationship between the politicians and scientists? What does it look like? It's extremely difficult. at least by now, even in Nigeria, as poor as evidence-informed policy making is in Nigeria compared to other countries, now there are beginning to be appreciation of the need for scientific evidence or some kind of evidence in policy makings. But it is still extremely difficult working with politicians, despite the fact that politicians themselves know at this point that we need evidence, we need scientific evidence, we need some information from some experts, but it is still difficult to provide this evidence, right? And one of the major reasons is because politicians think they know better than you. An average politician, regardless of his level of education, he or she thinks he knows better than you. That there is hardly anything new you want to tell him. So have that at the back of your mind. They know a lot. Also, one important thing, and I think whenever we are making discussion about evidence-based policy making, we always present evidence as if science is the major thing in policy making. No, as far as the politician is concerned, science or your evidence is only a part of the policy making process. It's only a part. They have so many other considerations. And those considerations include public opinion. What are the members of the public thinking? I don't want to look bad. Elections. They are looking at fiscal priorities. To fund this policy, where is the money coming from? And also, they look at existing policies and existing laws. Let me give you an example. When the National Assembly was considering implementing the minimum wage, we conducted some research. We conducted some research in our institute to show that, okay, how will this minimum wage, how will it benefit? How will it benefit like workers in Nigeria? We did our research. A team of like 7 economists, political scientists, development studies experts. We did the research and we said that, yeah, everybody wants minimum wage. But when we did our analysis, at least based on the expertise and the available evidence, we saw that minimum wage will not probably reduce poverty. We presented the evidence, we presented the methodology, we presented everything. But they said no, that the people want minimum wage, right? So at that point, they don't only consider your evidence, they also consider what the people think. They consider how will people see me, the election is coming. This is extremely important. And also, one thing that a lot of us as researchers don't always think of when we are considering giving evidence to politicians is because, to a large extent, particularly let me use parliamentarians now, they know the law better than most of us. Parliamentarians, they know the law. So you are providing scientific evidence. That is fine. But they also need to put your scientific evidence side by side with existing law. What does the law say about this? What does the law say about this? So as I said, your science, your evidence is only a small fraction of the entire process. Another issue with politician-scientist collaboration is politicians want certainty, they want solutions. As researchers, most of the time we deal in probability. This is the case, if this is it. So we are not, most of the time, we are not as straightforward. Of course, in science, you can have some gaps, some limitation, but to a large extent, politicians want certainty, they want solution. That is what drives them. And lastly, there is sometimes mistrust between scientists and politicians. Because the scientists, the politician can think that for this scientist or for this researcher to write this, probably he has some interest. I will give you an example. I think like about 6 years ago, there's an organization called the Institute of Chartered Economists of Nigeria. They wanted to enact a law. They employed some economists, they did some research on why the Institute of Chartered Economists of Nigeria need to be established. And some members of the National Assembly look at it and yes, but at the end of the day, they got to know that the scientists that brought up the idea, that wrote the paper or that presented the evidence, they are the one behind the Institute of Chartered Economists of Nigeria. They are probably the one trying to establish it. So to some extent, at the end of the day, we also did our analysis. Like economics is not like chartered accountant. Economics evolves every day and things like that. So at the end of the day, these politicians, they got to know that these people presenting this evidence, they are the one that wanted to establish this organization or this institute. So there's this kind of mistrust. The politician is looking at, does this person has a vested interest on this issue? What is his interest? So this has created some kind of distrust between the two. So currently, where do politicians get their information or their evidence at the moment? As in, I'm talking about the politicians in Nigeria, the National Assembly members. Where do they get their information? They have aides, they have political aides. Normally, each member of the National Assembly is entitled to 5 aides. And because of that, you're supposed to have a lawyer who is experienced in bill drafting, you're supposed to have a researcher, and you're supposed to have all these kind of aides to help you in your work. So these aides are the first front line of information. As an aide, you're supposed to provide information to your principal. So they get information from their aides. Politicians also get information from academic and policy research. Now, let me say that is what we do. We were established to provide evidence, policy research, and evidence to parliamentarians. They get information from us, they get evidence from us. They also get information from newspapers, from television. You'll be surprised that a member of the National Assembly, a senator, a representative, is going to the parliament tomorrow to go and say something he saw in the newspaper today, or what he saw in NTA News yesterday. That is the only information he has, that he's probably going to be holding a paper and start speaking. So they get information from all these sources. They also get information from government reports. For example, the Committee on Appropriation that works on budget, they get information from the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation. They get report from these places, and that report can serve as evidence for them in their work. They also get reports that are shared by their constituents or by lobby groups. For example, let me give you, when Nigeria was about to sign the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, you have several organizations that were lobbying at the National Assembly, like several reasons why Nigeria should not sign and things like that. So this kind of evidence, this kind of reports are kind of evidence for the National Assembly to take their decision. They also get evidence from public hearings and stakeholder engagement. This is extremely important. And I think this is the area that researchers like us can use to penetrate. On every issue, particularly a bill that is being deliberated at the National Assembly, there is always a public hearing. And that public hearing is to harvest the opinions of members of the public, members of the academia, and other pressure groups that might have interest in this issue. So for every bill that has to be passed at the National Assembly, most of the time there will be public hearings. So that is an avenue for a researcher to present your own evidence. And of course, most of the time, it's not everybody that presented some memorandum that will be invited to come and present them. But these are just avenues that you can get your research input to them, and these are ways that they also get evidence. And they also make use of consultants. You see several committees, they have like loads of consultants, experts, that gives them evidence, information on several issues. And I think when I started, I think somebody asked a question about focus group discussions. This is extremely important. This is a very veritable source of getting information. I remember during when the National Assembly was, after President Buhari signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, one of the committee chairmen invited us, I think about 5 of us, to his office and was asking us about this agreement. We share ideas with him, and like I said, yeah, they are planning to domesticate the agreement. That what is our view? So we were about 5 experts. We have a lawyer, I'm an economist, we were about 3 other economists, and we shared our experience. To that man, that is evidence for him, at least to do whatever he wants to do at that point. So they can get this evidence from all these sources. But the challenge with getting evidence from these sources is because how do you determine the quality of the evidence you are getting? You read newspaper, you don't know who wrote it, somebody put something on social media, you get a report from your constituents, you don't know the quality of this evidence. And another problem with this is what I call information overload. You have several information just jumping at you on a particular issue. So as a politician, do you have the capacity to even synthesize this information? You read the newspaper, you see something about this particular issue, then the next thing is you open Facebook, you see somebody is writing another compelling evidence. So at the end of the day, you are even more confused. So those are issues politicians face every day. How do they determine whether this evidence is credible? And how do they deal with series of evidence coming their way every day? Okay, so engaging with politicians, there are rules of engagement. At least from my own experience, there are rules of engagement which we have to understand. Number one, you must understand the policy process. You must understand the policy process. For example, let me take example of a bill at the National Assembly. We all know that a bill is supposed to pass through 3 readings. It passed through the first reading, it passed through the second reading, it goes to committee, then it comes back for the 3rd reading before it's adopted. Right, if you're a researcher working on a particular issue, right, you have to time the delivery or the dissemination of your evidence during this policy process. Is extremely important. Even there are some other evidence we have provided, there are some reports we have written, that those reports, they are like 1 day late. Only 1 day. They've taken a decision yesterday. So you are submitting your report today. So you have to understand that policy process. You have to understand that policy circle. At this point in time, you have to know that, okay, this is where the policy issue should be now. This is where it should be now. This is extremely important. And also you have to remember, now, I'm focusing on politicians now. When you are engaging, you have to remember the values, interest, and influence of the politician. All politicians does not have the same influence. I'm very sure we all know that all politicians does not have the same influence, but there are some that have significant interest on the issue, and at the same time, they have significant influence. So you have to understand which of these politicians, for example, in the National Assembly, you have 360 House of Rep, you have 109 senators. Which of them, in particular, has significant interest on this issue? Which of them not only has significant interest, but also has significant influence on this issue? So how do we know most of the time, particularly in terms of interest? How do you know? Interest, you will know, because any issue that is of interest to a politician, he will raise it. That politician will raise it, probably on the floor of or probably sponsor a bill to address that issue. That issue is of interest. For example, there was a bill, I think maybe 2-3 years ago, by one very popular senator that wanted to introduce electric vehicles, that Nigeria should start working on electric vehicles. Right. This senator, at least looking at his reputation, is influential. And at that point in time, that issue of electric vehicle, I don't know whatever, but at that point in time, that issue of electric vehicle is of particular interest to him. So if you are writing a research on electric vehicle in Nigeria or something like that, that person is the main person you have to focus on. That is extremely important. And maybe for people outside, how do you know who is interested on a particular issue? On the website of the National Assembly, you can see the bills that they sponsor. You can see their resolution. You can see their motions. They raise motions around issues that are of interest to them. Or, for example, like maybe government want to form a policy government want to build a dam, as we have in the exercise. Government want to build a dam. The politician representing that host community has a specific interest. So if you are doing your research, you have to target him. And another thing is understanding the rule of engagement. You have to embrace interdisciplinary expertise. If you go to a politician that you are an economist and you feel this is how this thing should be done, politicians, at least, if not only politicians, everybody now believes that every issues can be looked at from a different perspective, different angles. That is why in where I work now, most of the things we do, economists come together, political scientists, development studies, and lawyers, particularly considering the kind of work we do, lawyers are very important. Because you can come up with a very good scientific evidence, a very good research, but what you are recommending is against the provisions of the law. But you as an economist, you don't know it. You don't know. It's the lawyer that will tell you, yeah, this is a very good recommendation, but the law says this. So you're just hanging there. Because at the end of the day, if you provide this evidence to the politician, it will come to nothing. Because during deliberation in the house or whatever, somebody will just flag it. Or even though if they didn't notice in the house, when it gets to the desk of the president and is about to sign, some of his advisor will tell him, no, this is against the provision of the Constitution. So this is working interdisciplinary is very, very relevant. Particularly for politicians, the law is important. Another thing is you must work in a team. I think is also very linked with this interdisciplinary expertise. You can't do it alone. You can let's just look at the shame. Probably as a researcher, you are the lower cadre. The politicians, they are the top. You are so like there are people in between, right? There are some people we call knowledge brokers. They stand between your evidence and who uses your evidence. And sometimes, like in fact, like in the Nigerian system, looking at the way our system is, it's very difficult for you as a researcher to provide evidence to politicians because the gap is wide. So that is why at some point it's very, very important to come together, working with established brokers. And brokers in this case can be like the Academy of Sciences. Like maybe Nigeria Association of Environmental Scientists or something like that. So coming together, they can serve as a knowledge broker. For example, let's assume now you have an evidence that is very, very important, germane for a particular issue that is under consideration at the National Assembly. And you write, probably there's a public hearing coming up next month. You've submitted your memorandum. That same evidence, if it is submitted by like the Nigeria Academy of Sciences or Nigeria Association of Environmental Sciences, it carries much weight than you submitting that memorandum in your own personal capacity. So that is why we have to understand these intermediaries. It's very important. Maybe for somebody like me, it's a bit easy because I'm close. Due to my institutional affiliation, I'm close, right? But for just any ordinary researchers out there, the gap is wide. So they are intermediaries, they are knowledge brokers, and they are communicators. And I think somebody raised that question at the beginning of writing policy brief. That communication is important because we don't communicate As researchers, we don't communicate the way politicians communicate. There's a gap. Also, timing is key. Seize the opportunity. Timing is extremely important. And it's also linked to you understanding the policy cycle. For example, now the whole world is facing is only a particular challenge, COVID-19, right? So now you're just going to the National Assembly now and just writing about something that is not related now. It is not important to anybody. Every senator, every House of Rep member that I know now want to shine. They want to stand in the floor of the National Assembly and carry a paper and be reading, like in their own mind, thinking they are providing solution to the current issue at hand. So you have to be current. I remember Professor Oneke's presentation. He was talking about reading newspaper, listening to news. You have to be current. And that is one of the things we do here. We focus significantly on current issues. And how do we know the current issues? Almost every day, we go to the website of the National Assembly. What happened at the National Assembly today? What are the motions that were raised? Who raised the motion? Maybe somebody raised a motion now saying that, hey, there is this World Bank report that shows that infant mortality is increasing in Nigeria. That is to tell you now that this, as far as that issue is concerned, is important to that senator at that point in time. When you also listen to news, you see some like current events. Some current events we can capitalize. So timing is very, very important. I will give you an example. There's something that's been happening with the EFCC recently, like mismanagement on fund or something like that. Some months ago, I wrote a policy brief for the committee, I think one of the committees, on EFCC. And the idea is this: I was just reading the newspaper and I saw that between 2015 and 2019, the FCC has recovered like several billions of naira, stolen money. So I went through the EFCC Act. So if the EFCC recover this amount of money, how do they spend it? How do they manage the money? Then when I went to read the law that established EFCC, I saw that the law give EFCC the power, the chairman of the EFCC, the power to manage the assets and to dispose them. So if the EFCC now probably sees an asset, a building or a house from somebody that is deemed corrupt, the chairman of the commission can decide to sell it. And you know, when I read this can create corruption even within the system, this can create abuse. I wrote a policy brief and like recommending that this particular part of the bill should be amended. At that point, I submitted it to the relevant committee. Probably it didn't really gain traction because the issue, there was no burning issue then. But now, any National Assembly member, senator, if they see that kind of, because now EFCC issue is at the front burner now. So that is why we need to seize the timing opportunity. If anybody writes now on how to address corruption or mismanagement, like they will listen now. And that raises another issue of being proactive and being reactive. Yes, it's good. We are proactive because you try to see, okay, what could likely happen and things like that. But maybe sometimes it won't gain any traction because it's not a current issue. Nobody's talking about it. So sometimes you also have to be reactive. When something happens, immediately you seize that opportunity. It will attract interest. And another thing is be ready for scrutiny. As a researcher, you know, we think maybe we have PhDs, we are smart. They are also smart. And they don't get information from only you. I think earlier I listed their sources of information. You are a researcher, they have consultants, they have aides, they have people that provide them with lots of evidence. So whatever evidence you are providing, you need to be ready to defend it. Because most of the time they will question you. Most of the time, some of my colleagues will send policy briefs to the National Assembly. The next thing you receive a call from the senator. Yeah, can you come to see me in my office? Or you said this in this, but somebody else said this is it. So you have to defend your evidence. So be ready. They don't take everything you tell them, they don't take it hook, line, sinker. No, they are ready to question you. They are ready to engage you. And another thing we don't do as researchers is we don't acknowledge gaps in our research. We don't acknowledge gaps. I said it earlier. I said politicians, they want certainty. They want solution. But most of our research is kind of probability. Acknowledge it. It's very important. It's very important. And always try to do follow-up. When you send an evidence, when you send whatever evidence or provide evidence, try to do follow-up through whatsoever means. I remember somebody, not in my institute, but somebody else, he sent something to the office of a senator. He didn't get any feedback. He just looked for the senator on Twitter and sent him a message. I sent this thing and probably provide a very brief this thing privately on Twitter. And the person responded. And through that, they were able to engage. And lastly, don't be discouraged by rejections. In fact, some of the time they will reject your evidence. Because as I said earlier, they have so many considerations. Your science is just only a part of it. In fact, a very tiny part of it. So sometimes they reject your evidence. You present it and they say, my constituency won't like that. And to them, that is who they are responsible to. They are looking at the next election, how they want to win the election. So if whatever evidence you are presenting to them will probably make them look somehow in front of their constituencies, then they won't accept it. So be ready for rejection. But when you have rejections, don't let that discourage you. Even as an institute that is affiliated to the parliament, we have sent several evidence to them, they don't use it. But sometimes we have sent to them, they use it. So you just continue to provide whatever available evidence. And as I said, the important thing is knowing who to target with your evidence. In fact, that can make the difference between your evidence being seen and your evidence being rejected. Knowing who to target. That is extremely important. If you are writing something for example, on climate change, and you are sending it to a senator, who is the chairman committee on health, who is the chairman committee on economic planning. It doesn't really have so much interest. You have to look who is the chairman, who is the chairman committee on climate change or environment. Because they want to shine. And I can tell you, all politicians want to shine. Those guys, you see them on TV, carrying one paper in their hand and like saying this. It gives them some kind of legitimacy. They know that their constituency are looking at them. So when they have those facts in their hand, it gives them so much confidence to stand and speak. Without that evidence, some of them will not speak. So let's take note of this. So evidence generation takes time. And I'm sure maybe Professor Neki or Dr. Oronje, they presented this table. The idea of this is looking at the timing. I mentioned that you have to seize the timing. Looking at the timing of every issue that is in the front burner. Most of the time, it's always complicated. In fact, most of the time, it's always impossible to now start conducting your own research from the ground, start collecting data. So most of the time, what you will only have access to do is systematic review and meta-analysis. This is the aggregation of evidence available on that particular issue at that time. That might be, most of the time, that might be the only thing that you might be able to present. I remember several times, the senator will just tell you, probably just write and request that, okay, there's this issue, I want to present this motion tomorrow morning. Can you give me some ideas of why it's a good idea? Tomorrow morning is given you by 5 p.m. today. And you have to send it to him tomorrow morning. So at that point, the only thing that is available to you at that time is meta-analysis, systematic review. Looking at all the available evidence, how can you synthesize them? and now say, okay, based on this available evidence, this is it, because you don't have that time. I remember in maybe 2012 or 2013, a senator is going to present something in South Africa. She was already on the flight. And she told us, you guys need to write this thing and what I want to present. She was already on the flight. We are still somewhere writing like the argument, the line of argument she's going to present. So you don't have the time. Particularly if you are working with politicians, you don't have the time. They will give you this thing today, they want it tomorrow. In fact, you don't have 1 week. At least from my experience, you don't have 1 week. Because you don't want your evidence to be late. There are several reports we have written here, despite we having a team, like they took the decision yesterday. The report is coming today. So most of the time is systematic review, meta-analysis, and that I think Dr. Danso Apia is coming tomorrow, so he will probably touch on that. That is extremely important. Systematic review. Most of the time, that is what you will have to fall back on. So I think it's very important that we take that tomorrow's presentation extremely important. So,
sorry, Dr. Omoju, just to cut in, it's actually today. That session will hold in the afternoon session by Dr. Danso Apia.
Okay, wow, okay.
On distilling evidence, yeah.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. So that is extremely important. Let's take note of that. So what are the challenges of providing evidence to politicians, at least from our own perspective, is trust in science. Do they really trust you, even as a scientist? As I said, when I mentioned earlier, they think, oh, maybe this guy has interest. Or political spin, this guy. Like, because he's very, I've seen it, like the experience I mentioned, you give two researchers the same background, you just give them the same evidence, provide recommendations to politicians. Because of their political ideology, they provided different recommendations. So this can be a challenge for politicians. Number two, capacity to assimilate scientific evidence. And that is why the person that talked about a policy brief, I think I find that extremely important. Sometimes when you write for politicians, most of the time they don't understand because you are writing in your own, maybe research language. They don't understand. So you need to write for them in such a way that they can understand the evidence you are presenting. And as I said, politicians have competing vested interests. So that is one big challenge you have to take into consideration. So the politician might feel good. This is a good policy. Yeah, this is a good research paper. The recommendation is very good. It's good for my constituency, but it's not good for his political party. He has to balance that. And as I said, the timing, the deadline is always short. The deadline is always short. Like, because at that point, you want to address issues that are grabbing the headline, that are on the headline of the newspaper. Like last week or thereabout, the president submitted the medium-term expenditure framework to the National Assembly. The same day, they sent it to us. You have to analyze within 3 days and return to the National Assembly, because once they resume, they will start they will start deliberating on it. So the deadline is very short. You don't have that time. So as a researcher, you must have that at the back of your mind. And another issue is, as researchers, we don't communicate well outside our circle. And that is why I also strongly believe that the issue of communication, policy briefing is very, very important, extremely important. Like among ourselves, when you go to academic conferences and things like that, you see people presenting, but when you present to policymakers, politicians, it's a totally different ball game. You need to write in their language, in ways they understand. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is information value. You are not the only one providing evidence. Even we have institutional evidence producing organization, we are not the only one. They get evidence from consultants. Most of the community have consultants. They have very strong civil society organizations, NGOs that are also providing them evidence. So you have to try to situate your own evidence within this load of information that is coming at them. And most of the time, evidence can be in conflict with the needs of their constituents. Because you, as a researcher, you are simply driven by evidence. You are simply driven by your evidence. But sometimes the evidence can conflict with the need of their constituents. For example, maybe the government is trying to build something once, and you look at the policy already issue. No, it would have been better if the government build it in this place, not this place. The politician, like representing that place, will say no, it has to be built in my place. So these are conflicting issues, and at least from my experience in Nigeria, is politicians, they trust foreign experts more than you. They trust foreign experts more than you. If I say something today, the way politicians in Nigeria will take it, like it's as if God has spoken. But if you, as a researcher based in maybe University of Lagos or University of Ibadan, if you present to them, they'll say, okay, what is it saying? Is he actually correct? So that is a major challenge, particularly in our climate. Okay, so somebody raised the issue of communicating with politicians, and I think I prepared a little bit for it. Communicating with politicians, you don't communicate with politicians the way you communicate with your peers, right? One thing about politicians is, at least that I know, they don't have time. They don't have time. Everything about your evidence that a politician wants to read, in fact, most of the time, is partly when their driver is taking them from their house to their office, that they are reading whatever evidence you send to them. So if you are sending them a bulky document, for God's sake, it's not useful to them. They won't read it. That is why the idea of policy brief, which somebody mentioned earlier, is extremely important. You can write a 30-page research, but the politician wants to see 1 or 2 page. 1 or 2 page, like to summarize everything you have done. And what does the policy brief? Because at least one of the major things we do here is we write policy brief, because that is how we communicate most of our evidence. So the policy brief just defines what the problem is. Here is the problem. This is why you should care about this problem. If you don't do something about this problem, this is likely the implication. So then you look at, okay, to solve this problem, these are the options to solve this particular problem. And you recommend the best. You recommend the best. And when we are writing policy, it's always good to use infographics, bullet points, and things like that. It's not good to write too much prose. They just want to see those facts, like it's very sharp. They don't have time to read. They are like extremely busy, and they have a lot of things to read. They are not reading only from you. And be clear and direct. No beating around the bush. Be clear. As in, just hit the nail on the head. And when you are writing for them, there are times you write policy brief. You can write to parliamentarians. You can write to maybe people in MDAs. Tailor whatever brief you are writing to that particular audience. As in, it's very, very important. Tailor your language, your recommendation, everything to that audience, and be visual. Now, there are a lot of infographics. What you can write in 10 pages, only 1 page of infographics can present the message clearly. As in, all the research you have done in 10 pages, all the paper you have written in 10 pages, 1 page of infographics, you have presented the message. And it's even easier for them to read and to grab. Be visual, use infographics, and provide practical recommendations. This is what, even for us, this is an area that we have to learn and learn and learn again and again. Providing recommendations. I'm a researcher, and I publish in peer-reviewed journals as well. And like it's very common that when we are writing recommendation, we say that based on this available study, you are advising the government to create an enabling environment for foreign investors, those kind of things. You're advising the government to create an enabling environment. Okay, for your academic paper, it's fine. But when you are writing to the politician, the senator will ask you, how do I create that enabling environment? Because you have given him another work. You told him to create an enabler. He doesn't know how to create the enabling environment. So you have to be practical. So most of the time, what we do is we have to say, okay, to do this, there's this section of this law, amend this law, amend this section. So you have to be, your recommendation has to be very practical and actionable. In fact, that is the word, actionable. Tell him what exactly he should go and do. That there is this law. For example, I think recently some politician are thinking of, oh, a lot of Nigerians, they don't register births and deaths. That's very common now. Like they don't, and according to the provision of the National Population Council, you're supposed to register birth and death. And when we are providing that recommendation, we could have said government should make policy, all those kind of things. They don't understand it. One of the recommendations we made, because when we look at the act, my colleague that work on it, when we look at the act, we saw that to register birth and death, you need to pay a fee. So now, if you want to give the senator a practical recommendation, an actionable recommendation, you just have to tell him that there's this particular aspect of this law that you have to amend. Change it from paying a fee of 2,000 naira to register your birth to don't pay any fee. So this one is straightforward. Before, the next thing is, if your recommendations are practical, the next thing is the next day or thereabout, you're already seen them raising that in the parliament. Because you have given them something to work on. The next thing is they are sponsoring a bill to amend the so act because you have made their work easy. Or for them just to tell you the government need to provide an infrastructure facility. You did not tell them how to do it. In fact, you have created another problem for them because you told them they need to provide infrastructure. You have to tell them what are the actionable steps they have to take to achieve that. That is what they want. They just want to read your policy brief and in the next minute, they know what to do. It's important. And be brief. Your policy brief, I said, be brief. It's extremely important. There are several times we write 50-page report. At the end of the day, we have the report. We'll send them the report. But at the end of the day, the report will be accompanied by 1 or 2-page policy brief. At the end of the day, that is the only thing they will read. So that policy brief has to actually be brief. And at this point, I just want to share maybe 1 or 2 personal experience. I think I've shared one of them in terms of like the EFCC Act, in terms of like knowing when to strike. Knowing when to strike. The EFCC Act, I mean, I wrote some policy brief and trying to, okay, I was being proactive, which is fine. Because I saw something, I saw there would be a problem. But nobody took that to heart. But now that there's an issue, I also have to seize the opportunity again. Because there is a headline grabbing issue around that topic. So that is one experience for me. And also recently, if you follow in the news, there have been some issues of this public works program. That the government wants to employ 774,000 people around the country for its public work program. It's a good program, right? But based on the available evidence, of course, based on the available evidence, we know that this program will not achieve anything the way it is currently presented. So we have presented our evidence. Of course, there have been issues at the political front on the program, challenges between the legislature and the executive. But the evidence has shown that the way the program itself is planned, it will not achieve much. So now, because of political interests, Now that evidence, because at this point now, everybody just wants to make sure that everyone in his constituency, or probably people that are loyal to them, gain access to these programs. So that's my override whatsoever evidence you have provided. That is extremely important. And also let me share another experience with the COVID-19 issue, the exiting the lockdown. You know, when we look at several countries like just relaxing their lockdown, the challenge that was presented to the National Assembly was, okay, other countries are opening up gradually. When we're in Nigeria to open up? With the economy, can you keep people at home for that long? Particularly people in the informal sector. That was a very big question that somebody needed to answer at that point. So in our own capacity, we also have to provide the evidence that, okay, we can't keep people this long because government doesn't even have the capacity to provide maybe some financial support for people, right? But at the same time, if people start working and people don't adhere to some very strict guidelines, the virus will spread and things will happen. But you know, at some point, government needs to take decisions even based on limited information. And that is what has happened. And lastly, the experience I wanted to share was a personal research I did for the Partnership for Economic Policy. And at the beginning of the research, one of the requirements, in fact, when you're writing the proposal, you have to identify government agencies or organizations that your research will be useful for. It's part of the requirement. At the beginning of the research, you have to identify and you have to engage with them. So engaging with this government organization most times can be very challenging for researchers because at that point, it was in my own personal capacity as a researcher. And when you explain to them that you're working on your research, you get a grant, the next thing they are asking you is that, you got a grant, okay, like how much are they going to collect and things like, so these are issues we are going to face as researchers. Working with politicians, working with government agencies can be very challenging. Sometimes you can ask for data, it can take 3 months before you get data from a government agencies. And probably most of the time, that might be the only data that probably will determine whether you're going to move forward or not. So these are personal experiences, these are issues that we might encounter in our daily work as researchers, trying to provide evidence for policymakers. So thank you very much. These are the references. Thank you. So I think
what if the evidence or research outcomes of a researcher is not in line with what the politician is thinking, but it is the truth and the evidence? What do you do? I think you mentioned a bit, maybe you can just elaborate more.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that question. As I said, politicians are moved by a lot of interest. And your evidence is only a small part of that interest, of that entire process, right? If you provide evidence, your evidence can be quality, it can be perfect. I mentioned the issue of this minimum wage. From the analysis we conducted, like minimum wage will not reduce poverty. In fact, it will make people worse off. Because when you increase wages, based on our analysis, when you increase wages, prices of things increase in the market. So what you can get, what you can buy with your initial minimum wage, what you can buy with your initial wage, now you buy less because prices have increased. But when we presented this evidence, like the idea is no, NLC wants minimum wage increase. My constraint, there is no, in fact, look, just imagine the issue of minimum wage. Just imagine any politician standing up and say that, no, we cannot pay minimum wage. Like that person will not win the next election. So that is the truth. So they have a combination of all these interests. So you can provide your evidence. And as I said, your evidence might be true, it might be credible, but it is only one of the evidence available to them. They have evidence from several sources. So your evidence is just one of them. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Shogbamu. Hello, ma. Dr. Shogbamu.
Yes, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Omoju, for your brilliant presentation.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And you have actually opened my eyes to so many things that are happening there in the National Assembly. But I'm also very sorry to say that it makes me think like there's something wrong with our politicians, honestly. And let me start by saying, if it is like this, I don't know whether I'm speaking for my colleagues in the institution. A lecturer and researcher will not go about pursuing any politician. And that is the reason why Nigeria is not moving forward. I can't imagine myself and my colleagues teaching from morning till 6 p.m., manage to write proposal, manage to carry out research, write the paper, publish the paper, then be begging, lobbying, going about looking for politicians that will accept it. It is never done anywhere. And I see the reason why people are shouting that the constitution must be amended. Outside this climb, scientists don't go after politicians. Money is being given to researchers every year to carry out research, after which they come and collect the outcome of the research and make use of whatever they want to use. Not researchers going about lobbying to politicians. If this is the reason why it is like this, that is the reason why researchers stays in their institution. They won't come out because they won't. You spend your money to do work, then you spend your money looking for politicians, you spend your money writing for politicians for gaining nothing. And like you rightly said, you apply for funding. Most of the time we get the grants from outside the country. Then I will use that grant to do the work, and I'll then be running after politicians. No lecturer is going to do that. But if you are going to do it as an association, you carry out a research and you have good results, and you can see that this thing will benefit your people, your population, or you save them from diseases and all that. You can, as an association, after publishing your work, put it together and send it to the politician. If they like, let them not make use of it. That is why we are in a mess. We have all our papers online.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Buraimo. I appreciate your
you are there, my brother, so you need to make a change. You need to make a change. There should be a group of people that will go online to search for this paper. When I was to be called in Abuja last year to come and participate in
Dr. Buraimo, Dr. Buraimo, we need to take other comments.
I'm sorry, maybe I'm the only one.
No. Your comment is well taken, and I'm sure it echoes the sentiment.
No, what you're saying is the truth. It's the gospel truth.
Yeah, we don't also want to give room to other
That's why we are not moving anywhere. That's why we are if we don't change, we will remain in this state.
She doesn't.
Okay.
Can I just respond 1 minute? Can I just respond 1 minute?
All right.
Dr. Buraimo, I think you raise a very valid question. But another thing is, as I said, the gap between the researcher and the politician is very wide. So there are intermediaries in the middle. They are like, because like, imagine you're in Lagos, you come into Abuja or something like that. So in fact, at the starting point, we academicians, we researchers, we need to make ourselves visible to them. We need to make ourselves, because like if they don't even know you, there is no, they won't take anything coming from, and that is why I think maybe when we know things going on, maybe in the National Assembly or other places, let's try as much as possible. Let's see what is going on in public hearings. They show it on TV. Yeah. Let's see what is going on in public hearing. Most of the time, as I said, even my institute, which is a specialized institution, is not all the evidence that are used. But at least we do our own by making sure we are providing the evidence and knowing the platform to present the evidence. And one of the platforms is public hearings. Public hearings, there are several times that they've invited academics from the university to come and present on whatsoever issues in public hearings. So I think as researchers too, we have to make sure that we make ourselves known. We have to attend some of these events. We have to maybe blog online and So I think that is very important.
Okay,
Do
right.
we really need to do that individually? They know that the institutions are there.
No, we don't need to do it individually.
We can't make ourselves visible.
No, we don't need to do it
Can't be going
individually.
there one by one.
No, we can't do it.
They know that we exist.
And that was why I was saying that maybe we need to now look at the role of the Academy of Sciences in this. Because I remember, I think Nigeria Academy of Sciences, there was a time they came to Abuja, we had some meeting and trying to see how they can also stand as that intermediary. But for now, there's nothing has come out of it. But those are the intermediaries, those are the knowledge brokers that can stand in the gap between researchers. Because imagine all the academics in Nigeria trying to provide evidence. Like, the gap is just too much. And so there has to be intermediaries.
And so there's no way this politicians...
All right, so I really need to break up at this point because some other people also want to speak and we are really running out of time. I am hoping that participants are also using this time to look at the stakeholder exercise. But I must say that the questions and comments are really interesting. First of all, I would like to take Mrs. Odeneye's response. She's the permanent secretary of the Lagos State Ministry of Environment and Water Resources. I think she wanted to make a comment, and then I have the hands of Dr. Akindele and Dr. Olujimi up. They would take their comments or questions after her. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So happy to hear the passionate discussion. And I'm just happy that we are in the way forward. This EUEPiN is a new thing and a new normal that has come to stay. And it will solve these problems that my dear sister is passionately talking about. I've been a civil servant all my working life from 1987 to date. This is the first time that I'm going to have this kind of interaction.
It is fine.
And I always say, like I said, that there is a gap, a dichotomy between the town and the gown. You are doing your thing and we are doing our thing. So this is, we need to forge a way forward. The 61st Science Association of Nigeria, they brought it to Lagos. That was my first time of hearing about SAN. They had been meeting in universities. And I said, what is it that you do in the university? Who is it for? Why is it hanging out there? You have pilot projects, you've done things, and we are not replicating it in the system. And when people come to blow big grammar, like I love the presenter, they blow a lot of big grammar, write 500 pages of proposal, and we don't just understand. We can just not make a head or a tail out of it. We just say, okay, all this grammar, go and do a small pilot in that. Okay, you can turn poo-poo to biogas. Okay, go and take that space and do it. They don't come back. They don't come back. So all this grammar, please do a pilot. Invite us to see. We are tired. This new normal is a normal of seeing too much grammar. Break all those your grammar down and show us what it is that you are doing. We want, my present problem as a PS environment now is to get plastics off the streets and make plastic to become currency. So that when people see plastic on the floor, they will stop and pick it. Please do something and bring it up. I promise you, it will get to Laha, something will be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. That's a very brilliant charge to us. Okay, I would like to, going forward, take comments or questions by Dr. Akindele. I still have some questions and comments that participants have shared, so I just want to quickly take those whose hands are up. Dr. Akindele, please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shogbamo, and thank you, Dr. Omoju, for the brilliant position. And one thing that struck me, one terminology that you mentioned, is that as researchers, we have to know when to strike, that the timing is important. And I also, to add to that, from what you also said, it's not just knowing about when to strike, we also have to know about the point of entry that would make our engagement very effective. And I think that is very important. So I want to ask a question on the issue of knowledge brokers. You mentioned national academies like the Nigerian Academy of Science and some other academies. You mentioned professional bodies. I want to ask, your body in the National Assembly and yourself, are you also not in a position to serve as knowledge brokers? Because you are like a door, as it were. You know the legislators and the legislative arm in and out. And I'm sure from what you do, you also engage with academics and professionals. So I want to ask you, I mean, I don't you see your body as yourself as a knowledge broker also, and have you also been doing that? And I think it's also important that your body, for example, should also give opportunities to researchers to have some kind of visiting status or internship or whatever, so that we can actually learn on the job. Lastly, we have professionals in the legislative arm. We have doctors, we have lawyers, we have engineers. Academics have been appointed as education ministers, but even when they come from our constituency and they get there, something happens in between. They are not seeing what we are seeing again, and they are not even fighting for the interest that they were known for before getting to that appointment. How can we effectively engage with professionals in the legislative arm to help us drive our engagement and drive our point home? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Akindele, for your question. I think the first question is whether the Institute is a knowledge broker. Yes, we are a knowledge broker. And the reason why I say that is, in fact, most of the evidence that we present, as I said to you, one of the issues we have is the issue of timing. Of course, every year we do our research, we take a national issue, you do your own personal research from beginning to the end. It can take you like 6 months on like a major issue. But some of these, what we call demand-driven work, that maybe a senator just tell you, I want to present this thing tomorrow at the floor at 11 a.m., please, I need some argument. Some of these things we present to them, they are sentences of evidence. And that is based on what you people in the university have done. You understand? On this issue, what we just need to see, what is the available evidence? Maybe it's Dr. Akinyele that wrote it, or it's Dr. Buraimo or something. The most important thing at that point, these are the available evidence. So it is this evidence that we synthesize most of the time within this short time of frame to present them. This is the available knowledge, or these are the available things we know about this issue, about this particular policy. So yes, that can be. And with respect to the issue of like internship and like at least learning as academicians to engage with politicians, yes, we have that kind of program. I think over the past few years, I know that there are lots of professors from the university that have come to the institute, spend like 6 months, 1 year. And I remember vividly, there was, I think, a senior lecturer from one of the universities in the Southwest. All his life, he has taught public finance in the university, and he doesn't know what a budget looks like, the budget document. You know, you are teaching public finance. Public finance is about budget. You're teaching public finance in the university, but you don't even know what the document looks like. You're just teaching theory. So he came to the institute, like, that was the first time in his life he's seen what the budget, actually what the president presents to the parliament, what it contains, the wordings they use. That is the first time in his life he's using it. So he finished his internship, he went back to the university, a different person. So whatever he's going to teach, public finance is going to teach. He's now taking from like a kind of more, like a more advantageous position. He has seen the process, what it takes, and he can, so that is how he can engage with his student. So I think I've answered that question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Omoju. Just before Dr. Olujimi takes his question or comment, and Dr. Olujimi, please, I beg you to be very brief. I think we have Dr. Ekweozo in the house, the Director of Environmental Sciences and Technology at the Federal Ministry of Science and Tech. Okay, I'm not sure if it's in, but I'll look out for him, because some of the recommendations that participants are giving at this meeting are things that we're going to put together and we're going to push to the different ministries and hopefully to the House as well. Because as you would notice, we have a lot of power brokers as our advisors and mentors on this project. And they were carefully selected for things like this. Again, it was also as a result of the experience I had at the FMST. So that when we have good recommendations like this, we can push this towards the different ministries so that they can activate, particularly this issue that is re-echoing about researchers having sabbaticals at the parliament, and even policymakers also coming to the research institutions. You know, so these are very good points. Dr. Olujimi, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. What I can say is just to thank Dr. Shogbamu for this platform. You know, as I said, is an eye opener. But my question to you, sir, is if we have a report as a scientist, can we like send such report to you probably after publishing our work? Can we collaborate, because this is Nigerian context now, and you are not being funded, to do research. Sometimes you are funded from other organizations, but is it possible, like your organization, to work with researchers from university to synthesize policy or policy brief that can actually help to move Nigerian forward? That is just my question.
All right, thank you for your question. Yeah, as I said, we work with a lot of researchers. I think I can remember, in fact, most of the time when we write some of our big reports, for example, one of the major reports we write every year is the budget analysis. Whenever the president sends the budget to the National Assembly, we do an analysis of this budget and we tell them, okay, this is what we think about this budget. These are the priorities that we think should be focused on. These are the regions and things like that. Before that is sent, actually we invite like consultants who are professors from the university to also give their input. So we don't work in isolation. We also work with people from the university system who are like well-known in their various. We work with them to also like look at what we have done to review. And based on this, we provide these policy briefs to members of the National Assembly or to the relevant committee in charge of that particular issue. So we don't work in isolation. We work with the academic communities and things like that. So it's very, very possible. And I think another line of thinking now is also looking at how like policy research institutions like ours and maybe the others available in the country can also maybe engage with the academic communities in terms of like training on policy briefings and things like that. So I think that is the right way to go.
So if we invite you for policy training, can you make yourself available even when we don't have money to give?
Yeah,
and please, that's one to you. Then to Dr. Temitope, please, I think you will have to coordinate, because please stop laughing. Please, Dr. Temitope, because this is a platform that I will not want the platform to just die. Please, to you, ma, is there an opportunity? Because in some instances where TED fund, we submit report to TED fund, and you know we are talking about environment. Is there an opportunity for you, or probably we talk after that, we need to be synthesizing from policy document from studies that are sponsored by TED fund? Probably we need to communicate to TED fund on this. I think that is one of the things that we can do so that this platform can actually achieve its overall goal. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Dr. Olujimi. I'm sorry, I was laughing about the issue of whether Dr. Omoju will come without me. All right, so I just want, yes, absolutely. And hopefully this platform will not die. And we are also seeking funding. And we also have very strong partners who are willing to help us to sustain this project. And a lot of your recommendations, that's why we are recording. We are going to go over it again, and we're going to work on the recommendations. We will also put together, and that's why within your working groups too, we can also put together proposals where we can start this initiative. You will realize that one of the things I said was that the secondment, one of the things the secondment wants to achieve is the setup of an evidence synthesis unit and knowledge translation units or centers at either research and partner institutions, because we cannot be sending each article to Dr. Omoju. What Dr. Omoju would need is a synthesis of evidence. And that synthesis of evidence means that systematic reviews, collecting evidence from different sources, not just only your own evidence. Yes. Because then using systematic review, and Dr. Danso Apia will treat that very well in the afternoon, there are selection criteria that removes bias and all of that. So that way it is clear, unbiased evidence that is being provided to them, which they cannot translate. Because even these synthesis papers are actually manuscripts and publications, which they cannot translate into policy briefs and transmit to the right senators. And I believe I'm echoing your mind, Dr. Omoju. Okay, please, I really still have some comments and questions. Let me take that, and then I know some people are itching to speak. Mr. Sunday Idowu said, Dr. Omoju, can you influence a politician by getting the buy-in of their constituents of what they want in their domain that will benefit them and use it to influence, as we see today, I believe, or something? Use it to influence rep member as seen today or thereabouts. That's from
Can you repeat the question? Can you repeat the question again? Let me get it clear.
Or is Mr. Sunday Idowu in the house? Because the question was not so clear. Mr. Sunday Idowu, are you here, please?
Yes, yes.
Okay, please, can you pose that question again? Yes.
Okay, what I want to ask from Dr. Omoju is that, our assembly representative, that can we get, that how do we influence them? That can we get through their constituency, probably to ask, okay, what do you need your rep or your senator to do for you? So you can use, based on that, okay, that probably to present an issue to them. That, okay, this is what you can do, for your constituency. So I'm just asking, probably you can go through their constituency to know what they need. That constituency can influence the representative. So that's just my question.
Okay, I hope you got it, Dr. Omoju. I think you're talking about how to influence politicians through their constituency members. Yeah.
I think that is possible, but I can say maybe that is not science.
It's like politicians through their constituency.
Yes, I get it. I think that is very possible because politicians, as I mentioned in my presentation, they are very, very responsible to their constituents. Those are the people that will vote them in the next election. So they listen to their constituents. But that is not science. And even without science, politicians do that at the moment. Most of the time they have constituency office. Of course, they don't do, but like the idea of them having constituency office is to have some people in that office looking at the community, what is going on, as in, so that the principal in Abuja, the community, the constituency office is in somewhere, maybe in Lagos or in Ogun or whatever the constituencies, but there are people there that are scouring the environment, trying to see what are the issues that their principal in Abuja can raise to make him look good, so that his people back home will think, yeah, he's talking for them. He's talking about our issue. So this is a very important issue. Yeah, you can get information from the constituent. But as I said, this is not science because it's public opinion of some people somewhere, right? You still need to do your own work to actually see. Let me give you a practical example. One of the major contention you see at the National Assembly is during budget, because every senator, every House of Rep member want to bring some project to his community. This is always a very important issue. So this is their work. I think there was a time there was the issue of budget padding. Actually, there was nothing like budget padding. There was no budget padding. What happened was some politicians were moving some project from one constituency to their own constituency, which according to law is allowed, right? So the issue is, they are there to serve the interest of their politicians. But sometimes when we provide the evidence, for example, when we analyze the budget and we see that, Southeast is getting a very insignificant amount of government budget compared to maybe North Central. So, we raise some of this issue, and particularly the senator from the Southeast, is very much interested. Because he wants to say tomorrow that, okay, why is the Southeast getting only 2% of the budget when the North Central is getting like 23%? These are issues that they want to shine. So you can get the attention of politicians with this, but they are not science. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. Okay, while I address the next comments, can Dr. Odukoya quickly please make a comment or ask a question, please? Dr. Odukoya, please. Dr. Odukoya, you have your hand up.
Okay. Yeah. Am I on now? Thank you so much, Dr. Shubham. Yeah, I would like to appreciate Dr. Omoju for a wonderful presentation. Actually, to me, it is another eye-opener. And I've really gained a lot. So I just want to admonish us, we researchers, that we shouldn't give up, although the process is hectic, like we know. But you know what I just want to say is when we are designing our project, there is an aspect called dissemination. In fact, most of the funders these days, they know that you have to pass the result of your research to people. They don't want you to put your result on your shelf to be wasted. So you should put an aspect of dissemination. Maybe if you know you are going to be lobbying the legislature to draft policy with regard to your project. So when you are designing the proposal, you should put part as a part of, it should be entailed and be well spelled out. You should highlight some amounts with regards to that. So that if you have to be traveling to Abuja, stay over in hotels, engaging these people in order to push across your policy to them. There's already a ready-made amount of money that you can use to do that. And that will cushion some effects of whatever you have to go through. So it is a sacrifice all of us must try to make if we are going to make a lot of difference in this country. If we say we are going to leave the politicians alone, let them do whatever they like, the policy they make, the law they make at the end of the day is going to affect us directly or indirectly. So we should go out of our own shelf and make an impact for a better Nigeria. That's just my point. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let me just add one comment to that. I think that is a very valid point. And I think I recollect a particular external grant, research grant I got. And of course, at the process of writing the research, you have to include some of the policymakers that you're going to engage. And for that, for the engagement itself, I think we got extra $2,500 for the engagement to travel, meet them, have discussions. So sometimes I think, as she said, there are like research funding in recent times have to include dissemination strategies, and I think that can also be part of the research budget.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Can I just I have a lot of comments and questions here with me. Let me take 3 comments by Mr. Tibere of the Planning, Research and Policy Analysis Department at the FMST. He says STI is cross-cutting. It is one of the drivers for sustainable economic growth and development. Developed countries are where they are today because they invest substantially in STI to engender socioeconomic benefits such as smart transportation, smart cities, potable water, climate change mitigation, automobile, and all that. So it's important that our lawmakers are educated on the importance of science. The next comment, it says our NAS, that is the National Assembly, need capacity building on STI. This is because no one nation is great without deployment of STI. I think that there should be constant engagement with parliamentarians. Another comment, I think that there is a need to strengthen existing agencies with statutory mandate for collection, collation, and analysis for policymakers to make informed decisions. I think that there is a need to strengthen, okay, so that's the repeat of that. Then I'm going to question now. This is from Mrs. Emma Moke of the Rainforest Limited, is an NGO. She says, thank you for your enlightening presentation. What do you think can be done for politicians to trust in the local sciences and Nigerians above the foreigners? That's a question by her. Can you quickly respond to that, please?
Okay, that is a big question, but I think somewhere, that is why we need to start by making ourselves visible. Make them know you, right? Write things, even like, in fact, most of the times, the only thing that you can use to gain attraction is just from your research, just write a blog. Just write a blog on one very popular, so they're beginning to appreciate, they're beginning to appreciate our local researchers. So I think the main point is just getting known, put yourself out there, don't stay in the university, attend some of this hearing, attend policy events, not only academic events. I think that, and engage. I remember Professor Oneke's presentation. He said sometimes we also have to make the outreach. Let them know your expertise and things like that. So to me, that is how best I can answer that question.
Okay, thank you. Another comment, please, because I want to ensure I capture people. Still from Mr. Sunday Ido, we said a retired top civil servant or university don getting into the National Assembly will not appreciate or acknowledge researchers and policymakers. Well, I think it's a comment, but I'm not sure why that is so. Maybe we can talk about that later. Another comment by Dr. Dedeke, he says, making yourself visible requires forming a formidable team that is cross-cutting, just like we have a formidable team in our technical work groups for this project. Still, Dr. Dedeke said, maybe there's also the need for researchers to engage with the House as visiting scholars or peradventure for sabbatical. I think this has been mentioned. Another comment by Dr. Somi, he said, someone said our challenge is mostly moral, not epistemological. I am sure our presenter will know if there are differences in engaging a politician who is a former researcher himself and another who is a total novice. I wonder if there is a difference. I think that's a comment to question. Do you want to respond to that so that we can go to maybe feedback from the exercises?
Yeah, from my own experience, I don't think there's any significant experience, because even in National Assembly now, you have professors there, you have people that have been in the university. So I think it's just some person. I don't want to mention name, but I can tell you there are some people at the National Assembly, before they sponsor any bill, any motion, they will ask for evidence. They will ask for some scientific advice. They are not professors. I think it's just maybe they are kind of the way they are learned and things like that, but they are not professors. So I don't think being a professor or a former researcher make any difference. I think it's just a way of understanding that you have limited knowledge and probably you need some scientific or some more knowledge on any particular issue.
Okay, thank you very much.
And at the height of doing that is knowing the different powers of these stakeholders. As I said, I'm very sure at the end of the exercise, I'm sure at the top most, you will see the president there. Yeah, probably you have the minister, the parliament, because those are the people that take most, all the stakeholders are important, but it's just for us to know that they are not equally important. Some people are more important than some people. So that is just the idea that at the heart of every policy, one of the most important, if not the most important, is the politician, whoever they are, maybe the president, the minister, or the parliamentarian. So that is just the idea. So we should always have this at the back of our mind, that the ball falls, it falls on the desk of the president or the politicians to take the final decision. So we always have them at the back of our mind whenever we are doing our research. Thank you.